The quote for today is, "Alexa, skip to 2022. Today we have a passage from St. Luke. Normally we've been reading St. Mark this year, but the Lord gives us a passage from St. Luke because the church gives us this passage because it's a very good Lenten passage, all about denying ourselves, taking up our crosses every day, and following Jesus. It's also given to us during Lent because the Lord predicts his own suffering, death, and resurrection. He tells his disciples that the Son of Man must suffer greatly. The Lord always referred to himself as the Son of Man. It's a title from the prophet Daniel, a messianic title, and it also refers to Jesus as the new Adam, the Son of Man. It's used 81 times in the Gospels, and the Lord knew his sufferings very clearly. He had a clear vision of what he would undergo. That's why he tells them he must suffer greatly. The Lord, even years before, could see his scourging, his crowning with thorns, his carrying of the cross, and the crucifixion, which would have made the sufferings far more worse, because when somebody realizes what they're going to go through, so sufferings become even more intense. And he clearly sees he'll be rejected by the three leading groups of Israel, by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes. In other words, by the Sanhedrin, the ruling class, and then be killed. And this would indicate that he would be handed over to the Romans because they alone had the authority to do the death penalty. And of course, the way they did that was through the most excruciating manner possible, the worst kind of torture imaginable, which was death on the cross. But Jesus does say, on the third day, he will be raised, referring to himself. So he clearly understood his passion, death, and resurrection. And then the Lord goes into this passage where he tells his disciples if they wish to come after him, they must do three things. And this is the Lenten message: to deny ourselves, take up our crosses daily, and follow him. That is what it means to be a disciple of Christ. That's what true discipleship is all about. First is self-denial. That's what we do during Lent, to deny ourselves, to become less selfish, more caring, more giving, more generous. As St. Paul says, it's no longer I, but Christ who lives in me. We want to rid ourselves of self and selfishness and to be filled with Christ. And number two is take up our cross daily and follow him. Well, when we hear the taking up our cross, we understand it 2,000 years after the time of Christ. We know what the cross meant, his suffering, death, and of course his resurrection. But when people heard those words in the first century Judaism, when Jesus says you have to be willing to take up your cross, the only thing that meant for them was you have to be willing to follow Christ to death. The only people that were taking up their crosses were condemned criminals by the Romans who had to carry their cross from the Praetorium to Mount Calvary. To take up one's cross meant they had to be willing to die the ignominious death on the cross, to be treated with such contempt, to be a person rejected, and to carry one's cross was the worst imaginable fate. And yet Jesus says you have to be willing to take up your cross. Now, of course, when we look at what our crosses are today, they're not physical wood that we're carrying, but many are carrying physical sufferings of diabetes or cancer or arthritis or other physical ailments. Maybe a person's cross is financial, the loss of a job and financial struggles. Maybe a person's cross is a relationship with family members or neighbors or co-workers or whoever it might be. Or maybe it's a spiritual, emotional cross of an illness that they're struggling with mentally or psychologically or spiritually. And Jesus says, take up that cross every day, and that will mean you'll be my true disciple, and then to follow Jesus. Where did Jesus go? First, he went 9 months into the womb of our Blessed Mother. So if we want to follow Christ, we consecrate ourselves to Mary and entrust ourselves to her and she will continue to lead us closer to the Lord. So we should consecrate ourselves to Our Lady, ask her to help us to carry the cross. And there's one quote here that I just saw the other day from St. John Vianney. You must accept your cross. If you bear it courageously, it will carry you to heaven.